So my role is not, you need to write this on this topic, on this thing, you know. It's more like the topic can be whatever. The content changes every semester. I don't assign the same, you know, poems or articles or whatever, because, you know, I want to change it up too,
course,
a
yeah.
little variety. But it's like the structure stays and gets strong, like better the more I learn from students, and they're informing it. Like, you know, I'm responding. It's just, I'm not like top
right.
down.
It's not one directional flow of information.
No, it has to be both. And so I think that's what I mean by strengths-based. It's like, it's an agreement, right? Like,
sure. Well, and the way that you summarize that sounds very familiar to me in terms of, like, ideally how we try to frame a team lead, team member relationship. Is it's not one directional, like, crack the whip, you do this and you do it right. It's like, let me explore what your strengths are, leverage them, and then together, like, we can get to a place where we've accomplished something.
yes.
A quick disclaimer before today's episode. Our guest Kyle is speaking from personal and professional experience and not on behalf of her employer or any other university. Thanks and enjoy the episode. Hello, welcome back to the NITW Podcast. Excited for another episode here. I have my good friend, Dr. Kyle Oddis. And Kyle has had I think it's safe to say, circuitous career path. And we'll start with kind of setting the context of where you're coming from professionally, educationally, and from a neurodiversity perspective, and just kind of give us, like, the career recap, a little bit of, you know, what are the different, like, checkpoints that inform your approach to neurodiversity and how you are exploring and applying that today.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. I think that I'll just start by saying, like, my career path has been sort of like, my lane is like the middle one, right? Or the one that is sort of in between the lane that you're supposed to pick and kind of just stay in it,
ready
right?
Ready to weave wherever
Yes.
you want to go.
So it's sort of, I don't know, it's not really like a jack of all trades, master of none. It's sort of like the middle lane is where, like, that's where I trade in, right?
Yeah,
so
a bit of a shapeshifter, chameleon, perhaps?
Yeah, kind of. But it's in sort of like retrospect, I think that I've been attracted to the same thing across all of the roles. So I think what's kind of circuitous, as you said, right? I have a PhD. I've been teaching for a little over a decade now, but while I was teaching, I always taught because I loved it. But then I also worked in private sector, like ed tech, for a while.
Right.
And then I worked also, you know, nonprofit consulting.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I've kind of hit the three main I hit the triangle, right, of like you know,
a taste of all three sides.
Yeah. But then as of recently, I went back to full-time teaching. So now I'm in a faculty position. And I think across all the roles, my role was really to kind of find that middle common ground, like lane where it's sort of, here's a lane. How can we, if we need to change lanes or if we need to kind of talk to each other across them, I'm sort of the person who tries to bring those worlds together. And I realized the way that I do that is through design, like thinking in systems, and thinking about how I can, like, make things legible where it's like, you know, people aren't talking past each other as much, where it's just sort of, how can I translate this to over here so that they can kind of see each other and hear each other, right? And a lot of that has to do with just like basic language level communication, like back to basics definition, right? So I teach writing. I teach and study writing and rhetoric. And so poetry, literature, but then also hybrid genres and forms. My teaching intersects with like health humanities. And so a lot of it is just, you know, doing a lot of that, what I call like bridge work or even, you know, hinge work, like, you know, to kind of like help the door open a little bit so that, people can kind of understand and hear each other and talk to each other better. And, you know, sort of the way I introduce that to my students is the way that I would introduce that in other roles in different sectors, whether it's a senior in high school or, you know, a freshman in college or a C-suite executive like decades their senior, it's sort of like we always start with definition, right?
Yeah.
Like defining terms so that we have a shared understanding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great. And I think that one of the through lines there that you called out is design, which in all those industries at every level of education is a universal thing. Inclusive design is a universal concept, and that stands to benefit pretty much any system you find yourself in, whether a for-profit organization, a nonprofit, an education, even just advocacy work. Like design, especially from a communication standpoint, I think one of the things that I've seen in your work and your thinking style is thinking about the audience's processing and understanding of communication at all times, which something that I'm not the best at. Like I write for myself, if I'm trying to communicate something, I communicate it, and most people probably do, in the way that makes the most sense for me. But I think you've gotten very good at circumventing that and universalizing, the approach to communication in any of those contexts. It's kind of a through line. So you communicate in a way that is very thoughtful to your audience, takes into account processing style, clarity from a variety of perspectives, and I've seen that at work, literally when we were coworkers at work. And I'm curious, like, how you would say, like, your processing style, your neurotype, the way your brain works, like how that informs your approach to your communication.
Well, speaking of triangles, the classical Aristotle rhetorical triangle, right? Audience, right?
Okay. If not everybody's going to know what this triangle is about. I don't.
My
we need a little rhetorics lesson.
Speaking of that lane, it's like, okay, so clarifying terms, right? Like basics. I think it's always, and I talk to my students about this a lot. I think it's not so much like we want to sound smart or sound like we know what we're talking about. I often say, well, if we know what we're talking about, we're able to take really complex ideas and say them simply so that anybody can understand it, right? So it's like, how do we communicate clearly? That has to start with listening, right? Or practicing that and understanding our audience, because that shapes how we use language as a tool.
All right, well, that sets a bit of context, gives kind of the, I would say, a taste of how Kyle Oddis's brain works. But moving on to like where that intersects with neurodiversity and the different work that you've done, I wanted to start with something that I've heard a lot from you, which is examining neurodiversity and examining systems from a strengths-based approach. And we've touched on that a little bit in the show, but it hasn't been a main feature. And so I think it would be worth like just pausing and defining that so everyone's on the same page. And I would love your just thoughts on how you would define strengths-based, a strengths-based view of neurodiversity, neurotypes, and then how that would apply to your thinking on design.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it goes back to like balance, right? Because, again, just like an argument, right? We've got two sides, right? But in a strengths-based approach, in some ways that implies that there's another side to that, which there is, right? But it's sort of like not necessarily having that be a zero-sum game, but like focusing on like observing. You asked how my brain works. I think it's curious, right? So I'm always trying to understand how to do something better, whether it's like listen better or like, support better or like, I don't know, share better, whatever it might be. And better meaning like in a way that leverages my strengths so that, where my challenges are, they can kind of like balance each other and communicate with each other and inform each other.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, like a strengths-based approach in my understanding is like, I look for like in in student writing, for instance, I look first for what's working, right?
Yeah.
And then I think about, not, well, how can we necessarily replicate that, but what's working about it and what is this showing me? And then, so that's really like how can I get more curious about, you know, where they're showing like their strength and what matters to them, me understanding that so that I can show them how they can bring that out or see that in themselves in a way, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's like,
I love that as an outcome of higher education, of like not just learning what's in the book, but like going through a process of learning about yourself in that way, in a way that is ideally practical outside of the classroom.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I have a hard time understanding education differently because I guess because it's like I don't see it as teaching or learning. I also don't see it similarly as a zero-sum game. Like the design of my classes are more like it's reciprocal. We're learning things from each other as it's going. I'm responding and adapting as they're responding and adapting. And so it's lateral, right?
Opposite of like a bell curve grade where like only so many people are going to do well. Like, no, your aim is to empower everyone in the room.
Yeah. I mean, my aim is no one fails.
Yeah. I like that aim.
Yeah.
As a former student myself.
Well, I mean, and so that's that process of like everything we just talked about. It's like over years, right? Like trial and error of like, okay, what worked? First of all, what worked? Like, well, all right, great. Why? What worked about that? Who did it work for? And not everything works the same for everybody, right? If there's a classroom of, 20, you're teaching 3 classes, it's like you don't know. It's different, it's different all the time.
Yeah.
And so designing like a structure for a course or like writing a paper or like how to, draft and revise and like how to build that over time, it's going to look different. I can teach the same thing in a class, 2 classes back to back, literally. Same exact thing, completely different personality of the class collectively with different personalities in it. And so it's really adaptive and like sort of real time. And it's just like, that's what I like about it because teaching learning is like a dialogue. So I think that all of this in my brain goes together, right? So this is an important part for me to say. So at the start of a writing class, another question is like, who thinks of themselves as a writer?
That's a hard
day
one. In a college of medical professionals or aspiring.
I mean, maybe no one raises a hand.
Yes.
But then by the end of the course, the goal is that the question changes or that's not the question anymore. And so it's more like, it's not about I'm not a good writer. It's more I can write. You know what I mean? Like I'm writing.
Right.
Like it's not, the question isn't even like, am I good or bad at it? Because nobody's just like a good writer by default. Like it's a skill that you have to practice over time, right? In order to like be able to continue. I don't know. I guess that's why I like writing because it's just, there's not an end point. I had a mentor at one point that said to me, well, it's never done, it's only due. And that always stuck with me.
So catchy. I love that.
Yeah, right? He had a lot of those. But, I think about that a lot in the process of it because the same reason, just like the two, it's the same thing. Like the same reason why it's so challenging is the same reason why it's awesome because it's just a process of failing over and over and over and over until all of a sudden a paper exists. And then you're like, wow, it's really not about like if it's good and looks like exactly what I think it's supposed to. It's just the fact that I made that.
Yeah.
And that exists because over time I had the like scaffold and the space to do it.
Yeah.
And, so my role is not, you need to write this on this topic, on this thing, it's more like the topic can be whatever. The content changes every semester. I don't assign the same, poems or articles or whatever, because, I want to change it up too, a little variety, but it's like the structure stays and gets strong, like better the more I learn from students and they're informing it like, I'm responding. It's just, I'm not like top down.
It's not one directional flow of information.
No, it has to be both. And so I think that's what I mean by strengths-based. It's like, it's an agreement, right? Like,
Well, and the way that you summarize that sounds very familiar to me in terms of like ideally how we try to frame a team lead, team member relationship is it's not one directional, like crack the whip, you do this and you do it right. It's like, let me explore what your strengths are, leverage them, and then together, like we can get to a place where we've accomplished something.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of transferability there, and I think that's somewhere we're going to go in a little bit. But one thing before we do is, as I'm thinking about this concept in a number of different contexts, is like learning is, I would venture to say, primarily an individual journey, but a strengths-based approach and strengths-based working can be collaborative. Collaboration is a big part of it. So like, can you just kind of explore that concept in a collaborative context where, you know, we have one person A's strengths and person B's strengths, and how do you go about navigating that?
Yeah. So I think I would like to challenge what you just said a
Great.
little bit.
Bring it.
So I think that, again, it's both and.
Okay.
Because, yes, there is a part where it comes down to individual responsibility. The students, like, if they don't write a thing, I can't engage with it, right? But if they do, then I can. So, and that's it. That's the only, if you try, then we can try, right? And so I think, like, with the strengths-based approach, it's like sometimes we think our strengths are one thing, or it's like we think a strength is this, or we're like terrible at this or that. And I think doing it collaboratively, someone else might see a strength in you or like help you like pull that thread, right, that you might not see. And that's essentially my role in a classroom. It's just like I can see where to pull threads. And it's not because I'm like shaping them into showing a certain strength. It's like I'm pulling where they're strength, and then they realize, oh, yeah. And then it sort of like syncs with what they already understand about themselves. And then it's sort of like, I don't know, I think that's why it's important that it's collaborative, because you know that
Sorry, if I can, the intersection of one strengths profile and another allows for each individuals to kind of amplify and build, whether that is a teacher-student relationship or a coworker relationship. There's potential for kind of ideally greater than the sum of the parts kind of outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a teacher without students.
Very true.
You know, so it's sort of like I can't just teach, like, yeah, sure, I can teach myself or something, right? But it's sort of like, it doesn't happen without both, right? So I think that's really important. And I think that's why it matters. And I don't even think it's about like, oh, the value of just having everybody like thinking differently. It's more just like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be at? And like, okay. And I start with that too, like an inventory, like me just trying to understand like their goals, what it is where they are and what they think. And then sometimes that shifts, or sometimes it's different at the end of 14 weeks. You just never know. But like, I mean, if I weren't curious, or if I weren't like invested in that, like the collaboration, there's no point to doing my job. In my mind, I don't know, you know?
Yeah, I think that would make the wrong kind of teacher. If you weren't looking to engage, you know, with the other side of the room.
Yeah, and it's valuable and it's difficult. It's difficult because, you know, it takes time and effort and energy. I mean, I can't, you know, run a Scantron for like writing necessarily. And, you know, ChatGPT is not that either. But it's like, you know, it's that sometimes students will think, and I've heard the same thing on either end. It's like, oh, I thought I was a good writer, or I think I'm not a good writer. And you never, like, both have an equal chance to kind of flip or change or grow. And it's not like one prescriptive outcome that I'm trying to get at here. It's just like did they learn something?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
awesome. With that context, we're like living in the world of viewing individuals and teams from a strengths-based perspective. I want to shift back to where that intersects with design. And something that you mentioned to me earlier was cognitive architectures. Firstly, what does that mean? And two, where do the nuances of neurodiversity come into play with that concept?
So it's something that I'm kind of in the forming process. I'm drafting.
Cool.
I'm
the
still
cutting
brain
edge
drafting.
yeah.
But it's so cognitive architectures in how I'm thinking about it right now is again along the lines of like everything we've kind of talked about, where it's like this and trying to like converge, right? Almost, I don't know if it's like by default or why it really even happens. I feel like a lot of my work is trying to understand the ways I don't think, you know?
Okay.
So like I don't think in dualism like that way. It's all sort of just like blah, you know? So cognitive architecture to me is like one architecture or building or structure or system is like, you know, a condominium, and another is a tent, and another is a yurt, and another is like, you know, whatever it might be. But I think that like, I like to think about it as they're not separated in like things, but they're part of like a larger ecosystem. And so in order to have that learning and that collaboration, it's more like dyads, sort of like not dual, but like dyadic. So it's like one sort of it's like a counterweight, right? Like a balance. So like
between a condo and a yurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I mean,
well, they all are in the soup of architecture.
yes.
But
yeah.
they differentiate. They share some things. They differ in a lot of ways.
I mean, I think if an example would help. So like if I'm teaching argument structure, right? If I'm teaching like the architecture of an argument, right? I don't just, earlier in my teaching, I was just like, I don't know, let's write an argument and see what happens, right? Let's see what happens.
Sure.
But I'm kind of at the point now where it's like, okay, I'm going to offer sort of, like there's three like lanes, right? If we have a classical or a Twillman or a Rogerian argument, right? Like, what are those, what is the architecture of that argument? And so like, you know, I can make an analogy like, well, you know, one is sort of built like a house. If you don't lay the foundation first with the facts, then you can't, you know, have the warrant to build the door to come into the argument. And then there's no backing for the structure. And so if weather comes in, you know, the house won't hold, right? And so everything about that structure is built on a foundation. Whereas like another structure might be more like sitting at a table, right? Where the thing you have to do first is hear what everyone else at the table says before you pull up your chair and participate in the conversation. And then another structure might be more like a funnel, right? Where it's sort of like, here's the big thing, and then here's the specific things I'm going to focus on, and then here's this, and then maybe you bring it back out at the end. So the cognitive architecture is more like understanding how parts of however we think relate to each other, and how, you know, like for me, it's, my architecture is very like fluid, right? It's sort of that, again, I'm not thinking of it like it's this or this. It's kind of all like that. So a challenge for me often is I'm trying to figure out how do I translate or communicate my architecture so that someone can see, you know, see what's there.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in being neurodivergent, it's difficult sometimes when it's sort of like where it might have to look sometimes like, you know, I meet the HOA requirements of all the buildings in the cul-de-sac. Inside, it's more like, you know, there's a chocolate river and a bubble machine and stuff, right? But so how do we communicate that in a way where, you know, one building still appreciates what the other is.
Right. Which I think, I feel like you would need to find a balance between doing that from an inclusion ethos versus a masking ethos.
Yeah.
because you don't want to just mask for the HOA. Ideally, that's not going to be sustainable. I'm not here to posit solutions, but like maybe it's that it's not a one-sided equation, that the HOA needs to kind of meet in the middle. And in the context of education or work, it's not all on one party to be the only adaptable party.
Yep. And so like that's another piece of the cognitive art. Like I'm working on like the adaptive writing idea, which is that it is about that negotiation, shared understanding, you know, that middle lane of like sometimes like people aren't automatically willing to like think about that. So my whole thing is I want to show you, well, actually, what's the strengths that are shared here? What is the thing that you can build with together, right? How do we bridge? So that's that bridge work.
Yeah,
right? It's not like
it's strengths-based. It's bridge work.
It is.
We're connecting the dots here.
You don't have to do it like this.
Yeah.
And it's the same way I teach writing. It's like you don't have to do an MLA formatted essay on like Hamlet or whatever. Like that's not the point. The point is like, okay, you want to write about this topic, you want to write about this topic. Where is the bridge still accomplishing the thing where you're building together, right?
I'm curious, does that mean there has to be a set end goal that you have to orient towards? Like, it doesn't matter what it looks like or what direction, like what path we take, but we have to get to we have to build this actual bridge.
Yep.
Like, does that still need to be true while being flexible in all other areas?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that depends on context as well.
Sure.
Because,
in some contexts, you have a customer that's expecting a bridge.
Right. And I mean, if, like my mentor said, it's never done, it's only due.
Right.
I teach in a, time-bound, like there's a semester, there's a larger goal, right? But it's so what needs to happen, what bridge needs to get built in order for you to get to the next bridge that needs to get built, right?
Yeah.
So it's just all building, but it's like that scaffold of like, we got to build this one, and then you can build this one, or if you can find a way to get here or here, show me, right?
Right.
And
so more thinking of like sprint checkpoints. Like we have to have this by this, but it doesn't mean it's the end of exploring, this project. Like we could make the wacky chocolate bridge afterwards. Totally. But we do need to make, the arch bridge, the suspension bridge by X date.
Yeah, and so I have another weird analogy.
Great.
So it's like the important part of like remaining kind of open about that and being a little bit just curious in the beginning and seeing what is going to happen just by inviting like a little exploration. Sometimes that's uncomfortable, especially if people are used to having like very specific maps or blueprints for the thing that they're supposed to be doing. I think about, here's an example, like if someone says to you, okay, build a sandbox with this, and they hand you like, a wooden box that has like a hammer in it and some nails and like whatever. Someone might think I'm going to take that hammer and nails and go find some, this and build it and then get some sand. Another person might say, well, okay, make a sandbox. And then they just turn the box over, dump the tools out, and put sand in the box, right? So it's like there are many different ways to make that happen. So when teaching writing or like doing work with partnerships, it's sort of like, is your goal to make a sandbox? Because if the goal is to make a sandbox, the person that just dumped out the box that had the tools in it and put sand in it just did that. They met the goals of the task, right? But if that's not what you wanted, right? Then whose responsibility is it in that situation to think about what they might need to clarify or ask, why did they do that? In my mind, like they made a sandbox. It might not have been how I thought it was going to go, but they did it, right?
But different contexts have different flexibilities to that. So I think you need to have, determine like, are we open to any type of sandbox in a work environment? It's like, does this need to be done in a specific way? And some, I think, like project managers or people leaders, they need to question that of themselves first before questioning that of their employees to say, like, where am I too stuck on what this either end result or process should look like. And you're right. Sometimes there are contexts where like it has to be a certain way for whatever reason. Sure. Not everything can be an experiment, but some things definitely can be. And if you don't have, at least the possibility of that open, like that's where new ideas and creativity and innovation come from. So yeah, I mean, I feel like you're pointing out ways that a writing course and self-exploration in that can be a universal experience for problem solving, examining problems, and finding a path from A to B in a way that is not always a straight line.
Yeah. And like the fun, awesome thing, and also like the wildest thing about writing is that when it's like, you're just like, just tell me how to do it. Just show me how to do it. It's like, well, in order to learn to write, you have to write.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like one of those things that like you have to learn it while you're doing it.
Yeah.
And then like you just do it and then, okay, you learn a little bit more. But it's like, yeah, I think your question of asking ourselves first, I think when we're in leadership positions, or like when I think about my role in a classroom, like, that's my responsibility. It's not, if something is not like, for instance, if a student, uses AI in that context and that's not, that doesn't tell me, oh, they're trying to like get something over on me. It tells me like, maybe they're not understanding the purpose of this task. So how can I don't immediately go to like wrong, bad. It's like, what's that showing me? Right.
What are you learning about their problem solving, question processing approach?
Yeah.
What does that tell you about their strengths, and what doors might that open for them?
Right.
If that goes back to like the manager questioning themselves is like, is this defeating the purpose of what this assignment was for? If yes, okay, don't use AI. But if not, okay, that's one of the paths that a person could take. Right.
And so that questioning of just like, instead of going right to like, yes, no, blah, 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 it's like questioning first. Although, I think, so the sandbox question is like, well, if you are asking someone to build a sandbox with the tools you just gave them in the box, and you just maybe didn't expect that they were going to do that, if you wanted to build a sandbox, they did it. Right. So how does what they did that surprised you inform like your understanding of the task, right? Or if what you want is to see how they use the hammer, then does the question or the prompt need to change? Yeah. Right? So I think like all of it is just being curious about that, observing, right? And then it's just that's learning, It's like, I don't know, here's what's going to happen? Yeah. And then what are we going to do from there?
That's learning.
Yeah.
I like it. That was part 1 of our conversation with Dr. Kyle Oddis. We'll bring you part 2 in our next episode.